Whispers are swirling, tensions are rising, and a new wave of rumors has left the entire cast of Atlanta's most talked-about reality circle on edge. Word on the street is that Kirk may be hiding something so explosive it could shatter the image he's built and rip open old wounds that never fully healed. These whispers speak of a secret child, a claim so bold that even longtime viewers can't believe what they're hearing. And when this alleged revelation reached Rasheeda, sources say it wasn't just shock on her face. It was heartbreak, disbelief, and an emotional spiral that had everyone in the room frozen in place. People close to the situation say emotions ran high, voices were raised, and accusations flew like wildfire. The atmosphere turned from tense to electric in seconds, with the cast torn between comfort and confrontation. Cameras captured every moment, every tear, every glare, and every word that might never be taken back. Now, fans are dissecting each clip, each reaction, searching for clues in body language and tone, wondering if this could be the scandal that changes everything. Buckle up, because if these rumors hold even a shred of truth, the fallout could be unlike anything we've seen before. The air in the room felt heavier than usual, as if the tension itself was thick enough to cut through. Bambi sat there, her expression a mix of disbelief and controlled fury. Across from her, Kirk shifted in his seat, his eyes darting around the room like he was searching for an escape that didn't exist. Rasheeda sat silently between them, her hands folded in her lap, but her mind was anything but calm. It was the kind of silence that screamed louder than any argument ever could. It had started with whispers backstage, little fragments of conversations that Bambi had overheard. At first, she brushed them off. The entertainment industry thrived on rumors, and she wasn't about to let idle talk mess with her peace. But then came the screenshots. Cold, undeniable evidence that told a story no one wanted to believe. When those images landed in Bambi's hands, her heart dropped. She didn't just see a text conversation. She saw betrayal spelled out in words that hit like a punch to the gut. What made it worse wasn't just the content of those messages, but the casual tone Kirk had used in them. It was as if he had forgotten boundaries entirely, slipping into a comfort zone that shouldn't have existed. Bambi had dealt with drama before. She was no stranger to conflict. But this was different. This felt personal. So when the moment came to confront Kirk, she didn't hold back. She laid the screenshots on the table between them, the glow from the phone screen illuminating every damning word. Kirk tried to talk his way out of it, stumbling over half-formed sentences, but Bambi's voice cut through his excuses like a blade. Every time he opened his mouth, she hit back with something sharper, more direct. She wanted answers, but she wasn't about to let him wriggle out of this with vague explanations. Rasheeda, caught in the middle, felt her chest tighten with each passing second. She had been here before. Too many times, in fact. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore, and the sting of déjà vu only deepened the hurt. It wasn't just about what Kirk might have done. It was about the weight of years of trust being tested again and again. She wanted to believe him, but the evidence spoke for itself, and the look on Bambi's face made it clear there was no misunderstanding this time. As the argument escalated, voices rose, the heat in the room intensifying with every exchange. Bambi's words were laced with precision, each one hitting its target. She wasn't yelling just to yell. She was making it impossible for Kirk to hide from the truth. Every screenshot she mentioned painted the picture clearer, the kind of clarity Kirk clearly didn't want anyone to have. People nearby pretended not to listen, but their ears were tuned in. Moments like this had a way of traveling fast. The energy was magnetic, pulling in attention whether people wanted it or not. Backstage drama was nothing new, but this wasn't just gossip anymore. It was raw, unfiltered emotion spilling out into the open. Kirk leaned back, running a hand down his face, trying to mask the frustration building inside him. He hated being put on the spot like this, but it wasn't just about embarrassment. It was about losing control of the narrative. For so long, he'd been able to spin situations in his favor, smooth things over before they got too messy. But with Bambi here, armed with proof and a voice that refused to be silenced, that strategy was crumbling fast. Rasheeda finally spoke, her voice quieter than the other two, but no less impactful. She asked Kirk directly if what Bambi was saying was true, her eyes locked on his. It wasn't a loaded question. It was a plea for honesty. The pause that followed was long enough to tell its own story. Kirk hesitated, glancing at the table, then at Bambi, then back at Rasheeda. The silence between his breaths was enough to make the tension unbearable. Bambi wasn't here to play games. She reminded Kirk that the people who cared about him deserved respect. That trust wasn't something you could just rebuild after stomping on it. Her tone wasn't just angry. It was layered with disappointment, the kind that lingers long after the shouting stops. What no one else in the room knew was that Bambi had sat on this information for days, debating whether to bring it up. She didn't want to be the one to cause more drama, but the idea of letting it slide felt like betraying herself. She'd been in situations before where staying silent only made things worse, and she wasn't about to repeat that mistake. As Kirk shifted uncomfortably, Bambi's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down, and her expression hardened even more. Another message had come through, this one from someone she trusted, confirming that the rumors went deeper than she thought. Her grip tightened on the phone, and she looked up at Kirk, with a stare that could freeze him in place. The air between them was thick with things unsaid. Every second felt heavier, like the weight of the entire room was pressing down on their shoulders. Rasheeda's eyes moved between them, her heartbeat quickening as she realized this wasn't going to end with a simple apology. Too much had been said. Too much had been revealed. The way Kirk tried to lean back into his usual charm only made things worse. Bambi saw through it instantly, her words cutting him off before he could even finish a sentence. She told him that accountability wasn't optional, that trying to charm his way out of this mess was just another insult. Kirk's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it looked like he might snap back. But the fire in Bambi's eyes stopped him cold. Outside the room, whispers were already spreading. Someone had caught part of the confrontation on their phone, and in an industry where leaks happen faster than the truth can catch up, it was only a matter of time before the world knew. Bambi didn't care about that, though. Not in this moment. This wasn't about making a scene for the cameras. It was about finally saying what needed to be said, no matter how messy it got. Rasheeda's mind was a storm. Every memory of past mistakes, every promise that had been made and broken, every tear shed behind closed doors. It all came rushing back. She wanted to step in and make it stop, but she also knew that silencing Bambi would only add to the pain. This was a wound that needed to be opened if there was ever going to be a chance for healing, though at this point, healing felt like a distant dream. The energy in the room shifted when Bambi leaned forward, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the air. She reminded Kirk that actions had consequences, that even the smallest betrayal could leave scars that never fade. The screenshots might have been the spark, but the fire had been building for a long time. And as Kirk sat there, caught between defending himself and facing the truth, the weight of what had just unfolded settled over everyone present. There was no going back to how things were before. The words had been spoken, the evidence laid bare, and the trust, once fractured, was now shattered beyond easy repair. The room was thick with tension as Bambi stepped into the scene, her eyes locked on Kirk like a laser. Every step she took was deliberate, almost like she was preparing for a battle she had been waiting for far too long. The chatter around the set died down almost instantly, everyone sensing something was about to happen that none of them wanted to miss. Rasheeda sat still, her hands clasped together in her lap, but you could see the slight twitch in her jaw, a telltale sign that her patience was already wearing thin. Kirk, on the other hand, tried to wear that calm smirk he always used when he thought he could charm his way out of trouble, but even he knew that this wasn't going to be one of those moments. Bambi didn't waste a second on small talk. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward Kirk without saying a word. The glow from the phone lit up his face, and within seconds, that smirk faded. Whatever was on that screen was enough to make even Kirk, the master of smooth talking, lose his composure. The rest of the cast leaned in slightly, their curiosity too strong to hide, though they tried to pretend they weren't eavesdropping. Bambi finally broke the silence, her voice sharp but steady, asking him to explain the messages and photos she had in her possession. Every word she spoke felt like a bullet, and Kirk seemed to have no armor left to deflect them. Rasheeda's eyes flicked from Bambi to Kirk, her lips pressed tightly together as if holding back a storm of her own. The silence that followed was deafening, the kind that made the air heavy and every second feel longer than it was. Kirk started to speak, stumbling over his words at first, then trying to spin his usual narrative about things being misunderstood, taken out of context, or flat out not true. But the problem was, Bambi had more than words. She had proof, and she wasn't afraid to let everyone see it. The screenshots were clear, the timestamps matched up, and the tone of the messages left little room for denial. Someone from the crew shifted uncomfortably in the background, probably wondering if this was about to escalate into something much bigger. And it was. Because while Kirk was scrambling for a way out, Bambi turned her attention to Rasheeda, her tone softening just slightly, but still carrying that undercurrent of steel. She told Rasheeda she deserved better than constant excuses and half-truths, that the cycle had gone on long enough. Rasheeda sat there, still silent, but her eyes said everything. Hurt, anger, disappointment, and maybe even a trace of exhaustion from having to relive this same type of confrontation over and over. Kirk reached out to place his hand over Rasheeda's, maybe hoping to show some gesture of unity or to silently plead with her not to believe everything being thrown his way. But Rasheeda didn't move, didn't give him the comfort he was reaching for. Instead, she kept her gaze locked on Bambi, as if she needed to hear every single word she was saying without distraction. Bambi, sensing she had the floor, leaned in slightly and said she wasn't there to create drama for the sake of it, but because she thought it was time for the truth to be acknowledged in the open. And in that moment, it was clear. This wasn't just about gossip or rumors. It was about respect, trust, and whether those things could even exist in the space Kirk had created around himself. The tension between the three of them was almost unbearable to watch. Kirk shifted in his seat, his usual confidence slipping further with each passing second. He tried to crack a joke to lighten the mood, but it landed flat, met with blank stares and a chilling silence. Bambi wasn't letting him wriggle free, this time. She pulled up another set of messages, scrolling deliberately so everyone could see the progression, the undeniable pattern that painted a picture Kirk couldn't talk his way out of. And as she did, the reactions around the room shifted. Gasps, whispers, eyes widening as they took in the details. Rasheeda finally spoke, her voice calm but carrying a weight that made everyone sit up straighter. She asked Kirk, point blank, if he had anything to say for himself that didn't involve excuses or deflections. It was the kind of question that leaves no room for a slick answer. And for a moment, Kirk just stared at her, caught between trying to salvage his image and realizing there might be nothing left to save. He muttered something about things not being as they seemed, but his words lacked conviction. Bambi shook her head, clearly unimpressed, and said she had no interest in debating what was already in black and white for everyone to see. The air in the room had shifted completely now. What started as a confrontation was quickly turning into a reckoning. Kirk looked around, maybe hoping someone would come to his defense, but all he found were eyes avoiding his. People pretending to check their phones or look at the floor to avoid being pulled into the crossfire. Even those who might have once been in his corner weren't willing to put themselves in the line of fire this time. It was as if Bambi's evidence had done more than expose him. It had shifted the balance of power in the room entirely. Rasheeda took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving Kirk's face, and said that this wasn't about what anyone else thought. It was about what she felt, what she knew, and what she was willing to tolerate moving forward. The words hung in the air like a verdict, and Kirk seemed to shrink under their weight. Bambi stepped back slightly, as if her work here was done, but the damage had already been done long before she pulled out that phone. This was just the moment. It became undeniable to everyone present. As Kirk sat there, his posture slumped and his usual confidence drained away, the rest of the cast began to murmur again, their whispers buzzing like static in the background. Bambi slipped her phone back into her pocket, her expression calm but resolute. She had said what she came to say, shown what she came to show, and now it was up to Kirk and Rasheeda to decide what came next. But one thing was certain. Nothing about their dynamic would be the same after this. Whatever cracks had existed before had now widened into chasms, and it was hard to imagine how they could ever be bridged again. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every glance, every subtle shift in body language, every unspoken word hanging between them. Kirk tried to regain some semblance of control, suggesting they step aside to talk privately, but Rasheeda didn't budge. She made it clear that if the truth was going to come out, it would come out here, in front of everyone, without the safety of closed doors or hidden conversations. And in that moment, it was obvious that whatever control Kirk thought he had, it was gone. The power had shifted, and the truth had taken its place. The silence that fell over the set was thick, almost suffocating. The cameras might have been rolling, but no one seemed concerned about playing it safe anymore. It was as if every unspoken truth that had been hiding behind polite smiles and staged laughter had suddenly decided tonight was the night to come crashing out into the open. Kirk stood there, his face tight, eyes darting between Rasheeda and Bambi, looking for an escape that didn't exist. Rasheeda's lips were pressed into a thin line, the kind she used when she was holding back a storm. And Bambi? Well, Bambi wasn't holding back anything at all. She leaned forward in her seat, voice calm but dripping with the kind of certainty that makes it impossible to dismiss. "You can deny it all you want, Kirk," she said, her gaze never breaking. "But you know exactly what those screenshots show, and you know exactly why I'm saying this here in front of everyone." Her words weren't shouted, but they didn't need to be. There was a power in her delivery, the kind of controlled fire that made people pay attention. Someone in the back gasped softly, and it seemed to pull the entire room into an even tighter grip of tension. Kirk shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "You don't know the whole story," he muttered, his voice low but still loud enough to carry over the tense air. Bambi tilted her head slightly, almost like she was trying to decide if she wanted to laugh or explode. "The whole story," she repeated, her tone sharp but steady. "Kirk, there's no half story here. You're either the man who respects his marriage or you're not. And from what I'm seeing, it's pretty clear which one you've been. Rasheeda." Didn't move, but the way her eyes darkened spoke volumes. The rest of the cast sat frozen, each of them knowing better than to jump in just yet. The kind of energy swirling between these three wasn't something you interrupted unless you were ready to become part of the storm. Kirk finally turned to face Rasheeda, and for a moment, the bravado slipped. "Babe, you know how people twist things," he said, his voice softening in that practiced way he had when he wanted her to trust him. "You know I wouldn't..." "Stop," Rasheeda cut in sharply, her tone so sudden it sliced through his words like a blade. "Don't do that. Don't stand here and act like I'm too naive to see what's right in front of me. I've been down this road with you before, Kirk. I know the signs. I know the patterns. And I'm not about to pretend it's not happening just because we're surrounded by cameras." Bambi's eyes flicked between the two of them, her own expression softening for just a second, as if she was silently telling Rasheeda she had her back. Then she straightened again, looking directly at Kirk. "You can spin it however you want," she said, "but those messages are real. And the fact that you're still standing here trying to talk your way out of it instead of owning up, that says everything we need to know." For a moment, no one spoke. The air was thick with the weight of what had just been laid out. Somewhere, off to the side, a producer shifted nervously, clearly wondering if this was about to spiral into something they couldn't control. Kirk finally took a deep breath, as if bracing himself. "Fine," he said slowly. "I'll admit I talked to her, but it wasn't what you're making it out to be." Bambi let out a sharp laugh, the kind that wasn't amused in the slightest. "Oh, so now you admit it, but it's still not your fault." Rasheeda's hands clenched into fists in her lap, but her face stayed composed. "You always have an excuse," she said quietly. "Always. And I've been the one standing here, over and over, giving you the benefit of the doubt. But do you even hear yourself? Do you hear how you sound right now?" The camera zoomed in, catching every flicker of emotion on their faces. This wasn't just another argument for the sake of drama. This felt like years of trust, hurt, and disappointment, colliding in real time. Bambi leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing. "The truth is, Kirk, you wouldn't be in this position if you respected your wife enough to draw boundaries. You wouldn't be here defending yourself if you'd made choices that matched your words." She shook her head slowly, almost in disbelief. "But here you are, and the worst part is, you probably thought you'd never get caught." Kirk's jaw tightened. "You don't know me like that," he said, his voice sharp now. "Maybe not," Bambi shot back. "But I know enough to see what's in front of me. And I know enough to care when I see a friend being played." The energy between them was electric. the kind of crackling tension that made it impossible to look away. Every person in that room knew that whatever came next was going to leave a mark on their friendships, on their reputations, and maybe even on the show itself. And just when it seemed like the heat of the moment might start to cool, Rasheeda finally stood up. She moved slowly, deliberately, her eyes locked on Kirk. "You need to think about what you're doing," she said, her voice low but steady. "Because one day, all those excuses you keep leaning on, they're not going to be enough. Not for me, not for anyone." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words sinking deep into the space between them. Kirk opened his mouth to respond, but the look on Rasheeda's face made him stop cold. Whatever he was about to say, it clearly wasn't going to land. Bambi crossed her arms, leaning back with a look that said she'd said her piece. "We can sit here all night," she said, "but the truth isn't going to change. Whether you admit it or not, everyone here knows what's really going on." Rasheeda slowly sat back down, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Kirk remained standing, caught between defending himself and realizing there might be nothing left to defend. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second, because this was the kind of raw, unscripted moment that didn't come around often. The air in the room felt different now, heavier, sharper. Even the people who had been sitting on the sidelines could feel it. There was no going back to lighthearted banter or staged. The tension in the room had shifted from explosive to a strange, uneasy quiet. No one knew what was coming next, but every second felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 words unspoken. Kirk had taken a seat now, leaning back with his arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth as if he thought the worst was over. But Bambi wasn't done, not by a long shot. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and began to lay out every single detail she had been holding back for months. Her words cut through the air like a blade, steady and deliberate. She spoke about nights when Rasheeda had gone to bed thinking her marriage was solid, only for Kirk to be out somewhere else making choices that would hurt her if she knew. She mentioned private conversations Kirk had had with other women, conversations that had been disguised as innocent but dripped with undertones that were anything but. Each revelation seemed to land heavier than the last, and with every sentence, Kirk's smirk started to fade, replaced by an expression he tried to hide but couldn't fully mask. Rasheeda's hands were clasped together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She kept her eyes locked on Kirk, as if she was searching for any sign that he would own up to what was being said. But Kirk just leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and gave Bambi that same practiced, cool look that had probably gotten him out of trouble 100 times before. Except this time, it wasn't working. This wasn't a private argument in their home. This was public. This was raw. And the cameras were rolling. Bambi didn't just stop at telling stories. She brought receipts. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then turned it around so everyone could see. The screenshots glowed under the lights, words and emojis staring back at the group like silent witnesses. The messages weren't just casual small talk. They were loaded with implication, with inside jokes, with references that only two people who had crossed certain lines would understand. The room shifted again, the quiet growing heavier. Rasheeda leaned back in her chair, her jaw tight. She didn't say a word, but her silence was louder than anything she could have spoken. Kirk glanced at the screen, then back at Bambi and let out a laugh that didn't sound genuine at all. "You really going through my stuff like that?" he asked, trying to sound amused. But the way his voice cracked on the last word betrayed him. Bambi just raised an eyebrow. "I don't have to go through your stuff, Kirk. People send me things. And maybe you should think about why they feel the need to." Her tone was calm, almost too calm, the kind of calm that only comes when you know you've hit a nerve. There was a long pause. The cast sat frozen, unsure whether to jump in or stay quiet. It was the kind of moment where even the sound of someone shifting in their seat would feel intrusive. Kirk leaned back again, crossing his arms, but his eyes were darting around just slightly, as if he was searching for an escape that wasn't there. Then Rasheeda finally spoke. Her voice was low but firm. "I'm not going to sit here and act like I don't see what's in front of me. I've defended you more times than I can count, Kirk. I've stood by you when people told me I shouldn't. But this is different. This isn't just rumors. This is you making choices that show me exactly where I stand in your life." The words hung in the air, and Kirk didn't have a ready answer. His usual quick responses were nowhere to be found. He started to say something, but Rasheeda held up her hand. "Don't," she said. "Just don't." Bambi sat back, her point made. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about making sure the truth was out there. She had said what she came to say, and now it was up to Kirk and Rasheeda to figure out what they were going to do with it. The rest of the cast slowly began to shift back into conversation, but the energy had completely changed. There was no more light banter, no more casual jokes. Everyone seemed aware that they had just witnessed something that might change the course of Kirk and Rasheeda's relationship for good. As the cameras caught every angle, Kirk finally leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, and stared down at the surface as if the answers were hidden in the wood grain. He didn't apologize, but he didn't deny anything either. The silence from him spoke louder than anything else could. Rasheeda didn't press him. Maybe she didn't need to. Maybe she already knew that nothing he could say right now would undo what she had just seen and heard. Bambi glanced around the room one last time before settling back in her seat, her eyes calm but unreadable. She had walked into that room knowing it could get messy, knowing people might accuse her of stirring the pot. But sometimes the pot needs stirring, especially when the truth has been sitting at the bottom, ignored for too long. As the scene wrapped, there was no dramatic exit, no shouting match to cap it off. Just an unspoken acknowledgement that the ground had shifted beneath everyone's feet. And somewhere in the back of the room, you could almost feel the producers smiling. Not because of the pain in the air, but because they knew the reality of it all was going to keep people talking long after the cameras stopped rolling. Scenes after this. Something had shifted, and no one could unsee it. Sometimes the truth isn't whispered behind closed doors. It's thrown out in the open for everyone to watch. If you thought this drama was done, think again. The tension, the secrets, the looks. That could cut through glass. It's only getting hotter from here. Stay with us because the next twist is already on its way, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.